Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to an open lines space show discussion this Sunday. It's February 15th, and glad to have with us Marshall Martin, Bill Gowan, John Hunt, Phil Swan, John Jossi, Ryan Watson, and Dr. Plata. And any topic is fair game. And well, if you're not already listening, it doesn't do you any good to hear how to join us by telephone. So Um, in case someone's listening, they want to tell someone to join them, uh, email me and we can get them the phone numbers. Who's trying to talk and interrupt me? Marshall, mute yourself, please.
Yes, ma'am.
So, um, so this, as I said, is open lines and a couple of other quick points. There is no program for Tuesday night, and we're still working to schedule Hotel Mars. That's not unusual. And on Friday, it's a program about the Shenzhou 20 debris scare. And I have two guests for it, but the person who has scheduled and booked the event has yet to give me all the biographical information. So that will be filled in during the week. And that is on Friday, February 20th. And then there's a program called Moonshot Innovation. And on Sunday, February 22nd, the head of that project, Tricia Epp, EPP, will be our guest. I believe Tricia is in Canada, and not sure if she'll be in the States at that time, but she will be in Canada. Tuesday, February 24th is open, and it's a little bit iffy on my part for scheduling, but hopefully it will be booked. And our Friday program of the following week has been moved to Thursday, February 26th, because a couple of people who've been on the show before, Rachel Simmons and Karen Jones from uh, Aerospace, have written a really excellent paper on spaceports. And I will post a link to their paper, excuse me, as soon as I make the blog page for it. And they will be on Thursday morning, February 26th at 9:30 instead of Friday to discuss their spaceport analysis, which is pretty interesting and very different from what we typically hear on the space show. But today is open lines and anything is fair game. So what I've been hearing most about during the week, not just from the people in the space show room with us, but also in the general space persons, everybody has an opinion and seems to absolutely know for sure why Musk is pivoting to the moon. I mean, if everyone is really that confident, Musk must have maybe 500 reasons for pivoting to the moon, maybe more. And then AJ, maybe we should start with AJ. AJ so kindly found a Substack partial article by Will Lockett. And I say partial because apparently, as Will publishes on Substack, most of his paper is behind a paywall, and we are left with a tease so that we pay for all of his paper. So if someone knows that that's not correct and can share with us how
I
you
do.
access his full paper. Do you know how to access his full paper now?
Yeah, I got a free account and I could access it. So it looks like you don't need to pay to get to it. You just need to sign up for a free account.
So, for example, I could have used my Substack account and gotten the paper had I wanted to
Well,
do
I just signed up with my email on what was it called? Medium. The
it.
Medium.
Oh, on Medium. So
Yeah.
that's also where our favorite alien-seeking astrophysicist from Harvard publishes all of his
Oh,
papers.
okay.
Um, but
Yeah.
he doesn't like Mr. Musk, as an AJ. I circulated the paper on behalf of AJ because I'm giving him the credit for finding it, and he touted a Falcon Heavy solution, which we have been hearing AJ tout on the space show for I think about 3 centuries right now. So AJ,
Oh, 4 centuries,
you can lead off because you brought this to our attention. I've been seeking information on Will Lockett's credentials. I mean, like, is he as a SpaceX guru? Is he as a mighty aerospace engineer who knows everything? Does he have a magic 8 ball? Uh, or is he just giving us his opinion? And I don't personally know the answer to that, but AJ, maybe you do.
The only thing I know, I don't know enough, but the only thing I know is that he has been incessant critic of Musk and also Trump. He's a liberal commentator, very liberal, I presume, and he has been saying all these kinds of things, sort of, one can say, really strongly against both of these guys for quite a while. I don't know how long, but at least as far as I understand and know, for at least a week, or I mean, a year or so, that he's been writing like that. So I said in my reply to your email that take his comments with a grain of salt, or a lot of grain of salt, but at the same time he has also said some things which make sense to me, technically speaking. He has done some analysis, some with some mistakes and stuff too, but mostly not. And so we should not just simply offhand ignore everything he says, uh, but uh, but just pay a little bit of attention. So I am um, quite interested um, in his mention of Falcon Heavy, but I couldn't read the whole thing. In last paragraph, I think started saying something about um, but all is not lost or something like that. I think maybe Phil has a better idea. And then I couldn't read anymore, obviously, because of the paywall. After that, what he says, I don't know. So maybe Phil can fill in on that a little bit.
Well, he
Um,
does make some very bold statements, like
yeah,
Starship and he amplifies this, will never, never, ever,
yeah,
I think was his quote, fly.
right, yeah. Hmm.
But he lists no documentation or no support for anything he says. So if I were going to make a statement like that, I
Hmm.
might say, according to genius aerospace engineer Dr. Cathari, or I might say, according to Grok version 3, this is
Hmm.
what it's. I give a documentation for a statement like that. He doesn't document anything. I know, Bill,
Well,
you wanted to say something.
I thought it might be helpful to just sort of lay out the arc of his argument a little bit. He starts out by saying that this pivot that Musk has done away from Mars and toward the moon it has to do with the performance of Starship. He does make some, he labels Starship as a failure, which I'm sure makes a lot of people unhappy. And then, but he goes on to say that you can't use Starship. And I'm stating my understanding of it. So you folks correct me if I didn't get it right. But I think he said that basically you can't use Starship to go to Mars because the boil off issue keeps you from being able to do enough refuelings in orbit to be able to go to Mars. And then he says the same thing also applies to the moon. Um, and therefore, we need another approach. So did I read it correctly? And I just want to make sure everybody's kind of on the same playing field before we get too deep into this conversation.
Yeah, I
well,
think
I
I think
would
that's
say,
what I read too.
yeah,
He
yeah.
said that he seems to have done some math, although he doesn't actually publish the math, that
Hmm.
says given some assumptions such as a 1% boil off rate, that and a certain rate of launches and a certain payload in each launch, that the orbiting refuel depot will reach an like asymptote at some like 360 tons of propellant, at which point all out after that, all refueling missions will just be replenishing boil off and they won't actually ever fill it up. So that was an interesting finding. But of course, it all depends on some assumptions that you have to make. And whether those are correct assumptions or not, I do not know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he assumed that, well, he assumed that there would be a flight once a week, I think, in the second part of his, numbers that he quoted. So that, that probably is reasonable. But I think that more importantly, um, he has been doing this work and publishing some numbers in previous op-eds, which he kind of alludes to, and there are links to those op-eds in this article. So that I have not clicked on those, but I think I've read some of these op-eds before, which had some numbers for how much payload can be taken up with Starship and how this is all calculated, etc. So there is some, like I said, there is some mistakes in it, but by and large, 80-90% of that was correctly done.
Hey, you guys, I got a question here.
Mhm.
Did he address the obvious solution, which is zero boil off using cryo coolers? Because that's been demonstrated a long time ago by ULA, at least in laboratory setting, within similar thermodynamic environments, by both ULA and recently by Blue Origin. Did he even comment about that obvious solution?
Well, I don't think he did, but I don't think that has been really openly shown and proven. I don't know about ULA. I don't even know that ULA did that, but I know that Blue has tried to do that. Blue says that for the boil off of hydrogen mostly.
Yeah,
And
there's been
I couldn't quite make out what you said the solution was to prevent boil off. What is it?
zero boil off ZBO with cryo coolers, where you use energy to have pumps that condenses the gas back into liquid. I
So,
mean,
so I'm going to jump in on this one, but there's a, you know, you could theoretically do it by having a large enough solar array, something like what the ISS has, and that would power cryocoolers, which would keep the temperature of the hydrogen from going up, despite the fact that it's being irradiated by the sun. So I'm sure that you could do that, but then if you have these large solar panels, this forces you to put the entire orbiting depot at a higher altitude, or else it'll just this orbit will decay. So you end up with a choice between cryocooling at a low orbit or cryocooling at a, well, if you cryocool at a low orbit, you're going to decay. And if you go to a higher orbit, you need to send less payload each launch to refuel. So there's like these trade-offs, these complicated trade-offs that exist
so
um,
how
around
about
this.
Starship is methane and liquid, liquid methane, liquid oxygen. It seems like your absolute temperature is going to be quite a lot, percentage-wise, quite a lot higher than hydrogen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hydrogen
for
is
sure.
120 degrees Kelvin, which is very, very hard to do, and methane and oxygen are between 100 and 120 degrees Kelvin. So it is higher. And so the boil off is smaller, but it's not just simply something that you can avoid or,
I mean, you
um,
could you can regulate it with a cryocooler and lots of solar panels to power your cryocooler. So
yeah.
that's the problem. But then, like I said, if you put lots of solar panels on it, then your orbital decay rate will be faster.
But methane, Starship is the issue under question right now. So it seems to me as though you need quite a bit less solar panels to keep liquid oxygen and methane liquid. Yes?
Probably.
Guys, before you go any further, I have some bio information for the person we're spending a lot of time talking about. Um, he describes himself as a chaotic, autistic man trying to make sense of the world. Then he has several different blogs, but the general theme is, again, I'm going to read his words because he doesn't publish a real bio. A climate and politics journalist who is pissed off that the world is burning, corrupt, and broken, yet no one in power seems to care. and he does almost everything is, I can't call it hate, but I can call it really hard-hitting negative critical critiques about almost anything anyone's doing that does not support his idea that the earth is burning, everybody is corrupt, and everybody's making it worse, including SpaceX and including Elon Musk. But he does not provide a bio. He does have 3 or 4 blogs that he promotes climate and other stuff on Substack. And that's the most I can find about him. He does claim he's autistic, so I will take that at face value. So that's who we are spending a lot of time talking about. So that to me doesn't give him any real bona fides for boil off, for launching a rocket, for doing anything other than just having his personal opinion like any of us would have, except we're probably more informed on these items and probably more objective, or me as a non-engineer trying to explain boil off and mass and all of this stuff to a bunch of other non-engineers. So
That's
that's who we're spending time talking about. I just want to be
fair.
clear that we all know that. Yeah, Phil, go ahead.
So like what I think we're observing is engagement seeking behavior. And we saw Casey do it when he was on the show. We've seen this guy do it. We see Elon Musk do it. Like they make these very sensational statements that are very polarizing and probably too far to the left or right of whatever position is real. But they do it because the public likes it and they engage when they do this sort of behavior. And that's an unfortunate side effect of where we've become as a society. We click on things that seem sensational, and some people will click on the very say the. I'm not sure what the left and right of this space issue is, but the left issue might be Starship's never going to make it into orbit, and the right issue is Starship will take 300 tons into orbit. So the two polarized opinions are what seems to get most of the clicks, and the middle, the truth, is just less exciting to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
I
it
agree
would
with
seem
I
to
agree
me
with you.
that where does this guy get all his data from? I mean, I don't have data that says they can only take 20 tons into orbit, and that is that available? SpaceX data? Does he have an inside scoop? I mean, that all
But
seems to
yeah,
be.
that's something I worked on. There was a little bit of an email exchange on our site, on the Space Show site, and I actually had trusted Thunderfoot's point of view on that. Well, Thunderfoot actually trusted an AI who told him that you need 20 tons of additional propellant to go from the suborbital trajectory that Starship's on in its test flights to an orbital trajectory.
Mhm.
And I assumed that was a correct answer, but then somebody challenged me on the comments, and I went and did the math and found out that in fact that the AI had made a mistake. I identified the mistake. I think you only need like 4 or 5 tons of additional propellant to circularize the orbit. And then the data for how much propellant is actually in Starship when it's in that suborbital trajectory is on the telecast. Like you can see a little fuel gauge. And so if you trust that fuel gauge, I actually analyzed it carefully with counting pixels, came up with some numbers, and I concluded that based on the data that you can see, if it's accurate, that Starship probably can get into orbit, and it probably can get into orbit with a few tons of propellant, maybe 10 tons of propellant. I forget the exact numbers. Not 100 tons yet, but certainly possibly 10 or 20. Now, keep in mind, this is all counting pixels and
Mhm.
doing math, so it's not going to be perfectly accurate. But I think it's accurate enough to say that there's no way that the V2 Starship was ever going to get 100 tons into orbit. The V3, if they take 100 or 80, say 80 tons of mass out of the structure of V3, then it probably could get 100 tons of propellant to orbit. But taking 80 tons of structure out of a Starship rocket is going to make it very flimsy.
Phil, before anyone goes on, you reference Thunderfoot, and it's like Thunderfoot 001 or something like that. But
Yeah.
tell listeners who will listen on archives on the different venues, Who and what Thunderfoot is, because they probably don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah, so Thunderfoot is the YouTuber who started out just finding outrageous claims that companies were making and challenging them, doing some science. He's a chemist, I believe, a chemical, maybe a teacher in chemistry. He seems to be pretty smart at chemistry, and he usually falls back on that when he does some of his analysis. Uh, but lately, he's attacking other people, other businesses who make false claims or ridiculous claims less and more he's sacking basically Elon Musk and his enterprises. So he's just gotten really excited about Elon Musk and all the claims he thinks Elon Musk makes. Now he does do a very good job of finding historical video where Elon Musk has said something outrageous, and he makes a lot of fun, points out that many years have gone by and nothing like that has ever happened. So he'll find a clip of Elon claiming that Starship will take 500 tons to Mars or something, maybe 300 tons to Mars or 300 tons to orbit, and show that he hasn't come close after many years. So, so that sort of stuff is very useful because it reminds us that that Elon Musk is a business person who likes to make outrageous claims early on and make kind of aspirational claims. So that's a good reminder of all that. The science that he uses is not bad, but it's not. He's not an engineer. He attacks the heat shield tiles, makes some good points, but he's not an expert on heat shield tiles, so we can't be sure his what he's saying is accurate.
I
That's kind
know
of a summary of what he is.
he did
Yeah,
confess at one time that AI had lied to him, and he was really pissed off about that.
I don't think he confessed. I found that out. I
Oh,
discovered that.
you're
Yeah,
the one. I thought he took credit for it. So
no, I figured out that what his mistake was. Like he asked AI how much extra propellant you would need to circularize the orbit of Starship, and AI he gave numbers from the telecast which were in the wrong frame of reference. He was assuming it was inertial frame of reference, and it was actually Earth-centered or fixed frame of reference. And because of that little error, he thought he needed more delta V than he actually did to get into orbit.
I think it'd be fun to
me
have him
let
on the
me
show. I think that'd be a fun space show program, but
Yeah, it probably would be. Yeah.
not sure if he would do it. Go ahead,
uh,
AJ.
yeah let me okay, I'm not using Thunderfoot or anything. What I have is actually a program that we have created at Astrox Corporation, which actually works from fundamental level to create a stage, the entire stage of any vehicle, and that includes tanks. And um, there are equations that have been created by NASA and other places, and many other places that we are able to use to create and weigh and the actual weight of the tank plus the weight of the subsystems, all of them are put together in one integrated fashion, and that kind of creates the entire vehicle. So that's how some of these vehicles, which are shown in the op-ed that I have that was printed last week, and other places that have been shown, have been created from fundamental level, from component level. So all is called system of system type of calculation. Then you fly that whole thing and then see if that particular amount of tank or volume that you have is enough to put the propellant that you're using. You could be using hydrogen, you could be using methane, could be using RP, and their all densities are different, obviously, so it takes into account all that. So that real solution, that's an actual solution for a certain a task that you assign to it. Then you have, after that, what you do is that you take the ISP for each of these things, and based on the delta V that is required, say to go to orbit is 3.2 ish kilometers per second. So that kind of, and then, do TLI, etc. So, I mean, sorry, orbit is almost 9 and TLI is 3.2. So all of those things have to be then translated into amount of propellant that will be required. That's how I've calculated. That's how I come up with the propellant fraction. I'm not using AI. I'm not using Thunderfoot. I'm using it from component level. So I have a lot of faith in the numbers that I come up with, and the numbers that I come up with for refueling, and this one does not include any loss actually through boil off or any other way. This is the best that they can do if the boil off is zero, is that it is not possible for Elon Musk's Starship upper stage, which is 85 to 100 ton of dry weight, to be able to do this without 10 to 12 refuelings. It's not possible. So if that is the best you can do, zero boil off, that is, then those numbers are more real in terms of having come up with those numbers from fundamental equations, that those are the numbers that we have. That particular problem will still remain even if Starship is successful. That is the reason why I'm suggesting some other way of doing it in my op-ed.
One
Any questions there?
thing is we need to separate here. There's the claim that the Starship system, as it's evolved, can't put a significant amount of tons into low Earth orbit even. I mean, like 20 tons versus 100 is a big difference in the legitimacy of this. I mean, I think Falcon 9 can almost put 20 tons in, can it, or close to it, 15 at least, So that would be a disaster for Starship if that was the case, where if it's 100, it's still a useful Earth to orbit system.
But we
Yes.
have to take into account Raptor 3. So those numbers are based on Raptor 2 engines, aren't they?
That's correct.
Well, I know,
Yeah.
I know, but the difference between Raptor 2 and Raptor 3 in terms of ISP is not that much.
That's true. Yeah,
How about force? How about pounds? What's a pound's force? The thrust, the meganewtons.
that's
You're
not a
taking,
significant factor. So the main factors are ISP gives you a lot of extra improvement. Like if you can improve that by 5%, that translates probably into a lot of payload to orbit. Reducing the structural mass fraction of the rocket, both stages, helps a lot. That directly turns into payload. If
yes.
you improve the thrust of the rocket, that only helps offset gravity losses, which are maybe like 10% of your total losses. So that's not as big a factor. But one thing I think might be important is that the rocket right now goes off at full thrust as it starts, but then as it starts picking up speed, it drops its thrust, probably to avoid damaging the rocket because the rocket's only so strong. So it has to dial back its thrust, and if it dials back its thrust, it probably reduces its ISP as well. Although I don't know for sure how that math works. So if they could increase the strength of the rocket, like maintain the pressure inside it more optimally, they could probably have a higher thrust for longer, and that would help
But
both
then
in the
they'd
ISP
increase,
and the.
then they'd
Pardon?
increase the mass of the rocket, right? If they
No, not necessarily. This could be a purely just better engineering, better management of the pressure inside the rocket to keep it under the optimal pressure as it goes up, so it's as stiff as possible without exploding. These are just engineering problems, right? So you can do a lot of engineering tweaks, and I'm sure every one of these tweaks will get you another, say, 5 or 10 tons of payload. So it's possible they can do better than 20 tons. I have no doubt about that. I think
Hey,
100 tons is a very aggressive goal.
I'm trying to be clear. I'm sure you guys have said it, but if you could just repeat it. Where do we get this idea of Starship has only been able to do 20 tons? I know you're looking at pixels, but I mean, did they try to put more than that and weren't able to?
Let me make a reference here. If you go to SpaceX Starship Wikipedia, it comes in there and basically says the payload to LEO, which is designed. Now, the Block 1 was only 15 tons. Well, gee, that's what they mostly shot off. Block 2, which is the Raptor 2 engine, it was good for 35 tons. Now they're basically saying the Block 3 is good for 100 tons And I'm pretty sure that's what they're talking about, the Raptor 3 engine. So one of the problems is, where did you put the stake in the ground? What date do you want to talk from? Because I think it's what, 3 weeks away? In 3 weeks, they may do another test, and the stake in the ground, the numbers that we need to talk from, totally change. And I'm quite sure there's some engineers inside of SpaceX, no matter what test flight 12 produces, they'll have a pretty good idea of what the limit of uh, metric tons to Leo that they can do. So, one of the problems is, yeah, well, 3 years ago, Starship couldn't get off the ground. Well, yeah, that's a true statement. But Starship 11 looked pretty darn good. But yeah, it's short.
Yeah,
But
I can
they've got
jump in
development to go.
on the so where the data comes from. If you go to the Casey Hamner show, the one not his this show where Casey Hamner was the guest,
Mhm.
there in the comment section, there's a big discussion where another commenter and I sort of argued about what the payload was and how much extra payload it would take to get to orbit. And in there, that's where we talk about counting the pixels. And I think we both counted the pixels in a similar way. And I think we said there was like 4% fuel left in the tanks at engine cutoff. I'm trying to remember the numbers, and I can't be sure I remember them correctly. So please check the discussion if you want to know for sure what we said. But then we had to count for some additional fuel being retained for the landing burn, and then we figured out how much fuel would be needed to circularize and decircularize the orbit. We did some math on that. That's just orbital mechanics math and the rocket equation, and that's where we end up with that number, which maybe was 20 tons. I don't remember the number exactly, but it was in the range of 20 tons. Yeah.
So Phil, if I can clarify, is what you're saying is you assume, presumably correctly, that it starts out with completely filled, so you can't fill it anymore. And so there's a certain amount of tonnage of propellant. And then at burnout, you're measuring how much propellant is left. And you say, okay, that in the future, that would be divided by, reentry propellant and landing propellant, and then payload. So your total propellant is assumed to be like what the payload would have been. Is that right?
Yeah, I think you're bringing up the idea that if we topped up the tanks at launch, then you'd have that's presumably more propellant at the end, right? But the way the rocket equation works is like if you're 90% filled or 100% filled, it doesn't have a whole lot of difference on the actual amount of tons you get to orbit because it's ratios of dry mass to wet mass that really matter, not exactly how much fuel you put in the tank. So saying 95% full would be sort of like saying the rocket could be theoretically 5% smaller or 5% shorter, which might reduce its mass by about 2%, which would probably turn into 2% of the dry mass extra payload, which would be about 2 tons. So it's not going to be a huge effect to have it filled up at launch. Like if you do the math properly, that's what comes out from that analysis.
And that also assumes that Elon doesn't change the size of the tanks.
Yeah, I mean, you can change the size of the tanks a little bit. Making the rocket a bit bigger, a bit smaller, changes the payload, which if it's 20 tons, if he makes the rocket 5% bigger, well, then it's 5% of 20 tons more payload is what's going to happen. Not like 5% more total rocket payload.
Yeah. But this is part of the game that Elon's playing is the changes here, there, accumulate, don't accumulate, causes disasters. It's the real fun of engineering.
Yeah.
Well, let me say that all of these small things that we talked about are um, are improvements, etc., and they are all associated with uncertainties. So there is uncertainty percentage for all of them, and when you combine all of those uncertainties, some say you have to, and multiply those by each one of those uncertainties. At the end, when you come up with all those things, is that just makes it so big that anything going wrong in one or two of them will make the whole thing impossible to do. And that's what happened with we were when we were trying to do single stage through orbit with hypersonic and scramjet and other things. That factor sort of goes like this. And I've written several papers and presented a couple of papers on that. That is the problem. That makes the whole thing. If you are doing, everything works out, you might be able to just make it for an SSTO with 1% of the payload or something like that. That applies to Starship also, although because this is a two-stage system, the uncertainty band is not as bad, but it is there still. And so, as far as the Starship itself, the upper stage is concerned, it'll still have that kind of that kind of uncertainty band, which I forgot what it was called, but it was the rate of growth of dry weight, basically. That is impacted by this. This is the reason why what we do, what we do at Astrox is do it from fundamental level. So all of these things are added together. Then you also have to add to that a 15% or 20% or less uncertainty in the dry weight computation. So you have to add that also in there, and that when you do that, that changes the gross weight by much larger percent. And so all of those things together are what we are dealing with and we are dealing against. And so that's the kind of the problem that we are talking about here. If something goes wrong, if any of this uncertainty, like the TPS weight per unit meter square, for example, there are different TPS possibilities. And so that particular weight is off by 10% or 15%. It has a big impact. This is the reason why uh, going with a solution, more robust solution, is desirable. And this is the reason why I am putting forward the Falcon Heavy solution, because that is much more robust than at this point than Starship is. Because we have done that many times, flown that, whatever, so many, Falcon 9, of course, which Falcon Heavy is made up of, has flown 400 times. So we have much better idea of the uncertainty there, much better idea of possibility of success, and that's kind of where I would. That's why I'm suggesting that particular solution.
So, AJ, do you have a particular sort of criteria at which point Starship demonstrates itself sufficiently that you yourself would actually transition from a Falcon Heavy solution to a Starship solution?
Yeah, well, one can say, I guess jokingly, that after 300 flights for Starship, the same number as the Falcon 9 has flown. But I would say that probably 10, 15, 20 successful flights would probably, give me a lot more. I mean, I don't have a number for that, Doug, but I would say that it's, in that kind of a range.
I
Certainly,
mean,
what we have so far does not give me that at all.
well, I mean, it's still in development. It's had some failures recently, but that's sort of to be expected under development of a pretty complex system. But I mean, Flight 10 was a pretty successful, pretty nominal flight. So now, mind you, we've got V3, which is a sort of a new rocket, so we expect some infant mortality with this version. But it seems to me as though if they have flown as frequently as Starship test flights as frequently as every 6 weeks, and especially if they start retrieving their first stage, we could have a significant increase in flight rate. So I think within 2 years, we could reach your criteria.
I would, well, frankly speaking, I would doubt it, but no, it's possible that that happens. However, because of the refueling requirements of 10 to 12 to 15 flights, still, and then projection of possibility of failure uh, altogether, I would be very, very reticent about putting astronauts on top of this at this point I mean, at that, even at 2, 3 years from now, in terms of HLS, I would not do it. I would not, I mean, I would be very scared to do it. Let me put it that way. So, I
But,
mean,
but AJ, the astronauts don't like they only fly from the orbit, low Earth, low moon orbit, low lunar orbit down to the surface and back. So that's not got anything to do with the main Starship system getting stuff into orbit. Like the main Starship system and all those refueling flights are all cargo flights, effectively.
that is true. That is true. You're
Yeah, they
right.
they,
Yeah, I
they may
was,
not
yeah,
work, but they don't put any humans at risk unless there's a failure coming back and it crashes onto the ground or
right. Yeah.
something.
No,
Yeah.
but then I have a problem with the high, what is it, fineness ratio for being able to land correctly on the moon on a slopey surface, etc. So I would still not put even 4 astronauts on top of HLS, Starship HLS, even if it was successful in getting to NRHO and from NRHO to go there. So I would just, I mean, I would not do it. No. No.
But if given the fineness ratio, I mean, if they successfully landed cargo, would that satisfy you in terms of risking human life?
Well, uh, reason for this uncertainty for landing is because if you have not cut down your horizontal velocity completely to zero and you are trying to land, then the top of the and then your landing legs hit the earth, I mean, the moon surface. If there is a little bit of a momentum here at the top, if the fineness ratio is very large, it tends to topple over, which is what happened with two of those flights by, I guess it was Intuitive Machine was one of them, and the Japanese one, and one more actually. So that is also a very big concern, especially when the fineness ratio is 5.5 to 6. So that's, I think it to me, Starship is a wrong design for this. The Starship really, the upper stage really needs to be a much squatter, a smaller squatter, and that they should be doing that kind of a design, which I'm not sure if they are or not, but to me, it is just the wrong design.
So AJ, I'll counter you on this one because keep in mind that the way they were describing Starship, it had rocket engines at the top that were sort of designed to stop it from spreading a lot of dust out in the exhaust
Yeah.
plume.
Mhm.
So those rocket engines could be used to kind of make sure it stands up straight, like it could help it get oriented straight. And then with landing legs that are somewhat adaptive, like an adaptive suspension system on a landing that can conform to the terrain below the Starship wherever it lands. I think it's quite reasonable to expect that a company like SpaceX could engineer a tall rocket to land and not fall over. It might not get it right the first time. That's not what SpaceX claims to be good at, but they certainly claim to be good at landing things, even on a barge that's in an ocean. So if anybody can do that landing with a tall ship, it would be SpaceX, I would think.
A couple additional things. There's also the angular momentum for a high fineness ratio vehicle is actually favorable. The taller it is and the heavier it is, the greater the angular momentum and the better control authority you have over being able to get exactly precise. And there's what Phil says about the adjustable landing legs, which we have no indication, no statement that they're going to be doing that, but that seems like a pretty obvious solution. But what's more, we got to remember is that for the HLS lander, you have the high up landing engines, and those things can go ahead and counter last minute tip over. I think with substantial force, because it's got to counter the entire weight in 1/6 gravity and the entire weight of the entire ship. So to be able to move it left and right, I think there should be quite a bit of control there.
Yeah.
There would be,
May
but
I add
you
one other little deal, and that is if you come in and land on a rocky surface and it looks like you're going to tip over, you light the rocket off and go leave the moon. So, and the software can do that kind of thing in milliseconds. So I don't
I,
see that as a major constraint.
it is a major concern because you can't just simply you have downsized your propellant to go from NRHO to LLO and to lunar surface as much as possible. You may not have enough propellant left to just do a fly over and go back and come back again. You might actually be get into a worse shape than where you were planning to land. It's just not that
Yeah.
easy.
I just come in there and go, hey, it's mission abort. We go back home and start over. But to come in there and try attempting a landing twice, you're probably right.
Even the abort scenario might not work out because of the NRHO type of orbit. Like you can't just
Yeah.
launch at any time to rendezvous with the spacecraft
Um,
you need to meet with, which is in a large elliptical orbit.
Yeah.
well, there's a certain point where you come in there and apply practical engineering. If you have this scenario, you need to program it out, find out how it works, and make sure it's in there.
Well,
Not a problem.
don't you think they do that even if it's not made public to the satisfaction of this wisdom team on the space show?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's probably two guys like me sitting off in a corner that does it and tells the project manager, hey, we got it, no problem. And that's as far as anybody talks about it.
It's possible that all of these people, intuitive machines, the Israelis, Japanese, they all did that. They still failed. I mean, it's just really very dangerous to try to do that with this high fineness ratio, as far as I'm concerned. But I think that overall, um, what I'm suggesting, which is the Falcon Heavy, is more robust solution and less prone to probabilities of this type or probabilities of this type, uncertainties and all that. And that's a big deal. That to me is a big deal that you would be able to uh, be even then there is a possibility of failure, but at least the possibility of success is much higher. And then not only just one time we do this, I'm suggesting that we do this many times in terms of taking this tonnage to the lunar surface and putting it in different areas, different sections, different areas, let's say. And so for all of that, and cheaply, and it's about 85% cheaper, at least compared to SLS. We don't know what the Starship is going to cost, and there are all kinds of numbers floating around, but we don't know that. And considering what has been done and the numbers are available, I think that's a more robust. The whole problem is that we have to do something by 2029, 2028, 2029, in terms of, and this is not a flag planting thing anymore. We have done that and we have already been successful there against China. Now the next thing is to build cities. As I mean, I agree with Musk in that sense and his desire to do that. I agree with that. But to do that, you have to have, a constant supply of cargo and other things. over, a certain amount of time. But that constant supply has to be cheap enough to send that we can actually do that cheaply. And that is the reason for my choosing um, Falcon Heavy. I mean, all of those things together is the reason for choosing Falcon Heavy or New Glen's, Mark II or whatever, Mark 1.5, whatever it may be. That's the whole idea here.
I
The
have faith that Elon will eventually solve the problems.
Let me move us along to something related, but maybe a little different because we spent almost an hour on this. Does anybody believe that there is internal information that is not public that maybe is raising some red flags or maybe saying this is going to be a lot harder and a lot longer than we think and is influencing their pivoting to the moon?
Well, one thing I would think is sort of a political thing, since we have this competitor with the blue moon coming up, and that there's been some criticism. It looks like by pivoting the moon politically, Elon is trying to solidify his hold on the lunar lander system. That is, like, okay, get off the Mars thing. Let's get on the program right now. He also probably does realize it's more difficult than they originally thought as far as doing a Mars colonization effort. So the moon is more achievable, which I definitely agree with that, regardless of these other factors we've discussed, than actually colonizing Mars.
Any, anyone else have an idea on this?
But so I worked at a company, not SpaceX, but a different company, and I observed this company kind of have an institutional hallucination around the possibility that they were going to be able to do something which was not going to happen. And I actually observed how they weren't interested in finding out whether something was actually going to work out mathematically. They just wanted to achieve a milestone, and they didn't want to focus on whether the plan actually made sense in the long term. So I've observed this kind of behavior within a small company of about 50 people. So I think it could be happening within SpaceX as well, that they're not really doing detailed architectural analysis to be sure that the spaceship can go to Mars. And it's possible. I'm not saying that it's happening, but it is possible that they're just focused on the next milestones and not focusing on the long-term plan and whether it ever makes sense in the long term.
So effectively, I
But they
think
did
you're
pivot.
describing. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
I said, but they
you
did pivot
first.
to moon, so that may indicate
Yeah.
that maybe they did go through that process, and now they've finally had
Yeah.
a wake-up call.
Yeah,
Possibly.
I was going to say this more or less the same thing, that they probably realized they've been discussing this with NASA, that this particular thing, and they decided that to keep things in line, so to speak, it's probably a good thing to go for the moon first. I also feel that 50% of the reason for this is because of these other things that he's been mentioning about mass drivers and orbital data centers and all of those things, which can be done on moon or elsewhere. For to make that case before the IPO, that this is more of a business type of a business friendly thing to do than Mars. And so that I think that for investors who want to really not do an adventure to Mars, obviously, this is probably something also that he probably thought of. So, and then I have a feeling, this is just a feeling, and I haven't, I don't have any inside information, etc. And I want to talk a little bit later on about that, but about my meetings and stuff. But I have a feeling that that has played a part in his decision, which is a good decision, to pivot to the moon.
Mhm. I totally agree with you, AJ, that Elon basically looked at the books and said, "Where's the money?" And
Yeah.
went, "Gee, many businesses may have side projects that they're interested in, but when you have to answer to the shareholders, they want something that's making money, and they want to track the money that's coming in on a regular basis. They don't want to postpone it like venture
Yeah.
capitalists. And I think there's a lot of money to be made in moon projects. If nothing else, the military is going to have a lot of projects. I should say the military and NASA are going to have a lot of lunar projects they want to do. And uh, basically being pro moon versus pro Mars means that Elon's singing the right tune.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that with Mars, it's just really not possible to cajole the investors into giving, I mean, agreeing to that. Forget about giving money or anything. And I'm not talking about just the regular investors, but even people wanting to buy stocks. Those
Yeah.
kinds of things. So, if they don't feel, at least the vision has to be there. If you are really not making money in a few years, the vision has to be there for you to be able to make money, which is much, much more palatable and possible with Moon and the projects than with
Hmm.
Mars.
Yeah,
So
I think what's interesting.
I'd like to
Oh, sure.
like to jump in here. So Musk said that he explained the shift primarily due to practical advantages of the moon. It can be achieved much faster, less than 10 years for a moon city versus 20 years on Mars.
Right.
Launch windows to the moon are frequent, every 10 days with 2-day transit times, allowing rapid iteration and testing. And Mars aligns only, every 26 months. So
Yeah,
that's what he has stated.
that's right. Yeah. Mhm.
So 6 years ago, I did a presentation at Mars Society convention making this exact argument. I mean, because it's just really obvious that the round trip time to the moon compared to the Earth Mars windows is just radically different. Back then, I estimated about 72 times longer to do a round trip to Mars than to the moon. And I just said, so I think back then I said, I think Starship is a moon rocket for that reason. And here we are 6 years later, and the math is just unavoidable. It's very basic math.
I
Well,
think the really interesting aspect of this whole plan is the business case around making orbital data centers with lunar regolith. So the
Mm-hmm.
assumption here being that you can make a factory, put it on the moon, and then the moon is so big that you can make an infinite number of orbital data centers from the stuff on the moon with this supposed factory. So it comes down to how much does your factory weigh? How much does it cost to get the factory to the moon? And then how much market is there for the orbital data centers compute in orbit? So that's a huge project, but it has, like, just in terms of math, it has the potential to be profitable if you believe that the need or the demand for compute is going to continue to scale exponentially because of AI and maybe other applications.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
let
Yeah.
me point out that I mean I feel it's been widely misinterpreted. I'm like extremely widely misinterpreted that his statement is that Mars is going to be either delayed or forget Mars. And that's not true at all in terms of, and he pointed out in the original post, and then I think earlier today he restated it, and that is that the timeline for Mars doesn't change at all. The 5 to 7 years to, he said start a city, but I think that really what that means is putting crew on the surface of Mars. There is a reason why he specifically uses the numbers 5 and 7 years from now. That is the 2031 and 2033 launch Earth Mars launch windows, and that follows just very naturally from, okay, the November 2026 launch window is out of the picture. It's just Starship's not going to be able to do that. And then, so the first one after that would be 2029. The next cargo attempt, if the 2029 one doesn't work, is 2031. if 2029 is successful, very successful cargo landings, then 2031, which is 5 years from now, would be the earliest possibility of landing crew. But if 2029 doesn't work, so 2031 has successful cargo, then you're pushing it to 2033, and that's your 7 years from now. So Elon has not really changed anything in regards to Mars, despite the very wide and broadly assumed statements that Elon has backed off as Mars. He hasn't backed off Mars. He's simply added the moon as a priority.
Maybe true, but the fact is also that at one time he said moon is a distraction, we should straight go to Mars. That's it. Those are his words.
But that is also very widely misrepresented, because when he said
Yeah.
the moon is a distraction, he was specifically responding to a statement, a post by, I forget who it was, but somebody who said that O'Neillians need to harvest propellant on the moon and then launch it into cislunar space and then sell that to the people going to Mars. And it was in that context, with all of the Delta V craziness that statement implies, it's in that statement, it's in that context that Elon said that the moon is a distraction.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to slightly disagree with you, because I think he's in the same sentence, he said, moon is a distraction, we need to go straight to Mars. So
Yeah,
that really has very, very clear meaning here, not just simply in response to somebody.
No. In the exact context there, what he's saying is instead of SpaceX launching up to like EML-1 and then burning to stop to get gas from the moon, we're going to go directly to Mars. The moon would be a Delta V distraction. Instead, we should go directly, by we, he means SpaceX, not NASA. He wasn't talking about NASA. He said SpaceX should launch, do TMI, and just go right past the moon to go to Mars. That's what he meant.
That's a reasonable position to take. I think that idea of using the moon as a gas station is a distraction.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, somebody can probably pull up his exact quote. They want to do it off of AI, but in the meantime, all of you have seen, and I suspect read, Bob Zubrin's reaction to Musk pivoting to the moon, and Bob's not a happy camper. I don't know that he thinks Musk is a traitor, but he thinks Musk is making a really crappy decision. Uh, anyone want to talk about Bob's position or support his position or critique his position?
I feel like Bob is focused on Mars, and I think that's a good thing. I feel like he held out too much hope for Elon and his plans for Mars, and he should have kept his options open all along and said, I don't really want to put all my eggs in the Elon Musk basket. I should be putting my eggs in multiple baskets and multiple technologies for getting us to Mars. And I think he just put too much emphasis on Elon's plans, and that's very disappointing that Elon has failed to kind of deliver, and is now not even committing to deliver as much as he used to. I mean, he's still probably committing to deliver, but just after some other work. So I think this is just a case of Robert being disappointed because he didn't spread out his investments, his sort of emotional investments across enough possible technologies.
Yeah,
So
well
I was there in the Mars steering committee when Zubrin first started going negative on Musk and Starship, and his position that he stated at that time, which is I think near the beginning of when he started doing this, and even to now, you have to understand Zubrin takes a pretty principled position politically in terms of like Ukraine. He's very, very strong on that. He's also is frequently posting against Trump. And I think it's in the context of the time in which Zubrin started making this mental translation and arguments on his part, is Elon was getting into Twitter and was becoming really the enemy of the left. And it was in that situation where he openly, I think at the Mars Society Convention, he's basically saying, look, we can't pin our hopes on Elon, because what happens if another administration comes in that's, on the left? They're going to reject Elon's plan to go to Mars, and we need to find an alternative to Starship and Elon, because Elon is basically too unstable. I think that was the term he used. And so I think you have to look at it from that context. My view is that SpaceX is making so much progress, in my opinion, especially with Starship. I think they have the right architecture. And I think that if you had an opposing administration come in, I don't think they're going to stop the Musk Mars program, because I think it's going to be too far advanced, and there will be too much to gain for a future administrator, regardless of what side of the spectrum they are on, to take advantage of that capability. That's my view.
I basically come in there on the side of when you're doing business, you have to fold businesses together. And yeah, he bought Twitter. Why would he buy Twitter? It seems like totally well, he had to get his own place so he could get his own message out. Yeah, that's, it does fit in. He's gone off and did the Tesla robots. Well, gee, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done in space by robots, because you can't risk people spending hours and hours on spacewalks. The robots are much more efficient. And if you lose one, well, you cry about it, but it's not a big deal. It stops projects. So, yeah, Elon has a very special place he's viewing from, and sometimes we don't see the reasons that he's doing things. And this is part of, you got to trust your leader. And it seems like SpaceX leader is definitely Elon. And there's a point where Elon is going to be financially independent, that he doesn't care about NASA or the government. And that's where I'm hoping things go. But I'm terribly optimistic. So
I have been, I guess, kind of uh, talking about why we should go to the moon first, and before thinking about Mars, and written about that, and I've been on a couple of shows, etc. And I think I might have sent some information on that to you guys. But it was just wrong of Bob Zubrin to simply emphasize, and he did that in several Mars Society meetings and everywhere, other places, to go to Mars, and I think it was just a mistake. It is a mistake. Still, it's a mistake. And I, at this point, I don't really have much a good opinion about that particular decision of Bob Zubrin. Bob Zubrin's, obviously has written book about why nuclear is very important for any of these space things and other terrestrial things, which I agree with. But his insistence on, I mean, real insistence in this, and not just Mars Society meeting, but even other meetings and stuff, I think was just wrong, misplaced. And so I think that I'm not surprised that that is not happening and is not going to happen, which I am glad, because we have to go to the moon and practice about living in without atmosphere, more or less, or in 0.16 or 0.38 whatever it is, all of those kinds of things. Practice with something that God has given us as a gift 3 days away. You cannot practice that on Mars, For God's sake, I mean, what is so hard to understand here? It's not a rocket science, really, that we should not go to Mars directly. Whether we kill people or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but it doesn't matter in the long this thing, but it's just a wrong way to do something without having become an expert in something. And here, God has given us a place. God could have very easily decided not to give us the moon, you know, but it has given us the moon. Practice on it, practice on it, practice on it, and then think about going with humans to Mars. Forget about even building a million people
So
city on
AJ,
Mars
like,
that you wanted to do. So sorry,
yeah,
yeah,
on your practice point, like there's lots of
yeah.
ways you can practice things. You don't have to use the moon to practice everything. And if we
Uh,
didn't have the moon, we'd find another way to practice. But I think
mm,
the real the real question you should be asking is the more fundamental question, which is what are the reasons to go to the moon versus the reasons to go to Mars? And when it comes to Mars, they've got, first of all, we've never been to Mars. So there's like the sort of geopolitical win of getting to Mars with humans first is very noteworthy. It puts a country down in history as the first country to go to Mars. That's a worthy goal. The second one is that there's a much more scientific opportunity on Mars to discover potential early forms of life, or what they call it, second day biogenesis. These kinds
mhm.
of scientific
For the
objectives are much
explorers
more
among us.
compelling.
Yeah,
Pardon?
but I mean, we are
For the
Yeah.
talking about 10
explorers among
years.
us, yes.
Yes, explorers, right. And then the third reason is the placing a stake, like getting if you have expansionist tendencies, and tell me a world leader that doesn't have expansionist tendencies right now, getting a stake on Mars, like claiming some territory on Mars and establishing something there, has potential future value that's enormous, and it's much more exciting to get a stake of Mars, which is much larger in surface area, and has more resources, I think, that are useful for supporting a civilization than getting a stake on the moon. They're both important, but I think Mars is a more exciting place to claim a stake. So those are the big ones that drive you
Yeah,
towards Mars.
yeah, I would disagree with you.
Okay.
I would say that doing whatever it is that you want to do, that you said that you want to do about for civilization, or political, whatever, 10 years later, instead of right now, or 15 years later, instead of right now, is not going to make a big difference, not going to change things very much in terms of that. So just fine, have those ideas, desires, ambitions, but just do it after you have learned enough about how to live on this kind of situations on surface of something like the moon. After you build things there, after you've done that, now you cannot build things in. You said first thing you said was that you can be doing these things in space, and like ISS is probably what Leo or whatever it is that you might be alluding to. There are many things that you cannot do in Leo, um, including building a base, including a building a structure, and all of those kinds of things. So there are some things obviously you can do. Of course, it's a 0G as opposed to 0.16G, but that's probably not a big deal of difference. But I think that there are many other things that one can think of that you can do on a surface of the moon, including going through the lava tube, and including all of those kinds of things are very exciting. Living there, having regolith on top, building structures with regolith on top, and all of those kinds of things. We need to do that first. That should be the first step for next 10, 15 years. And Mars, obviously it'll still be there, and the political ambitions, but do it right. Do it with much less amount of possibility of failure or killing people, you know. So instead of doing it now, I bet you
Yeah.
that if you do it after 10, 15 years, your possibility of killing people going to Mars would be much less.
Here, here.
Yeah, you can't run before you learn how to crawl and walk. And I think that I mean that we're at that level when it comes to knowing how to colonize another planet, right? I mean, we haven't
Right.
learned how to crawl really. We don't know what the effects of all this is. So spend the time on the moon, learn how to do those things, and
Yeah.
not abandon Mars. And it's interesting to me that Robert's article was titled "Abandoning Mars is a Big Mistake."
Yeah.
I'm sure Robert does feel abandoned somewhat by Elon because I mean, what two kindred spirits there are. Those people, they both of them have nothing in their minds but going to Mars, and now one of
Yeah.
them's falling away. I'm sure the other is not happy,
I
and
think
I can
Yeah.
understand that. But
You should have said that Elon is not that Elon is abandoning Mars, but Elon is abandoning me. So that would be
well,
more correct.
yeah, he's certainly taking Musk at face value, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
saying
Yeah. But
that
yeah,
he's kind of turning away from Mars. But I don't think that's what Musk is saying, much as
that's
what
yeah.
Douglas said earlier.
It's not. That's not what's going to happen.
I, I think there's another issue here, and I think for the public, they don't give a damn about what you're saying, AJ, or anyone else about why the moon is better or anything. For how many years have we been told Musk is the richest man in the world, the wealthiest man in the world? He can do anything. He can even come into the government and tell people you got to cut this program or that program and get piss people off or not off, but he's the wealthiest man in the world. So I think there is a perception that, hey, the government can go to the moon, and for all the reasons AJ and others say they can, but screw it, Musk's the wealthiest man in the world. He can go to Mars, and he's going to go to Mars. How many times on the space show have people said, how could the government even stop him? And when I say they could refuse to issue a launch license, they think there are probably ways around the government refusing to issue him a launch license. What has happened is the wealthiest man in the world isn't planning to go to Mars.
yeah.
So to the public, there's been a government program to go to the moon. Whether it's a good program or not doesn't matter. And there has been the wealthiest man in the world who has taken us to Mars. How many times have we seen polls where everybody believes Musk will get to Mars before NASA? Musk will get to Mars before any government. Well, Musk flipped that, and the wealthiest man in the world is now going to go put his resources to go to the moon for whatever that is. I think that that's kind of a emotional shock to a lot of people that really somehow thought we have a Musk program to Mars that he can accomplish because he's the wealthiest man in the world. And the government's going to screw around and return to the moon and do this, this, and this. And now they're finding out that we don't really have a two-tier program. Everybody's headed to the moon. I think that's a shock to a lot of people. And I actually think Bob Zubrin has believed that Musk, the wealthiest man in the world, can do his own mission to Mars. And he should do that, and we should support him. And now Bob is finding out that his perception of the wealthiest man in the world is not what it was. So I think that's a big issue that is not really hit upon and talked about. But Musk is not planning his own private space program. He is not planning to go to Mars when everybody else is going to the moon. He's getting with the program. And I don't think a lot of people saw that happening. My own take on it.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with why we should be on the moon. I agree. I've always been a moon first guy. I never thought it should be moon first, Mars second, or a Sophie's choice. Sophie's choice is really crappy for the space program to get stuck into. Um, but I never thought that Musk would have carte blanche, no matter how much wealth he has, to just get up and go to the moon and land wherever he wants because the government controls a launch license. And by the way, they control a re-entry license. So, depending on who your government is and who our wonderfully educated, motivated, and highly informed congressional critters are, that launch license may not be so forthcoming, or the return license may not be such forthcoming.
Mhm.
So I
Do you
just
not
didn't
think
see it.
that it is? I'm sorry, somebody else was saying,
No,
speaking.
I'm just saying I didn't see
Okay.
Musk having his own program for Mars and everyone else
Yeah.
having the government program plus international partners. I just never saw
Okay.
that as
So
possible.
don't you think that there are, okay, so you said that there are many people who are upset about the fact that he's not going to first right away go to Mars or some on his
Yeah,
own
I
money
think
with
their
his own
balloons
money.
got burst,
But
AJ.
but but at the same time, there are also a lot of people who are probably happy or happier that he's pivoted to Moon
Yeah, probably,
and
but
Mars later.
we were
I mean
talking about
that
Zucker, who wrote a pissed off op-ed about
yeah,
it, and so we're talking about the people out there who are lambasting Musk for making this decision.
yeah,
Not
but
lambast Musk.
there are
I
a lot of people who are not lambasting him and saying that that's a more sensible
Of
decision
course it is,
also.
and I
Yeah,
think it's a sign of a more evolutionary approach for
yeah,
Musk than that.
yeah,
And Musk, like we were talking about under earlier with Phil with Thunderfoot, makes a lot of
yeah,
big ego boasting comment, kind of like Trump does. That just
yes, right.
are out there. And I also think the IPO is a huge wake up call for Musk. So, number one, he's going to have to put
Yeah.
out the public audited financial statements. He's going to
Hmm.
have to put out Q reports to the public quarterly. He is going to be under scrutiny far more than he was even with Tesla, which is a public company, and he got a full load of it from his management, as we know over the years, and his decisions with Tesla. And do you really think somebody buying SpaceX to make a buck is going to want to see all of these resources going to Mars that have no prayer in hell of making a buck on any kind
Right.
of simple payout?
Yeah.
And so
That's what I'm.
he is an experienced public company
Mhm.
official, and he got raked through the coals with it at times with Tesla. In fact, didn't he get removed from the judge ordered him to no longer run Tesla, and he had to get a CEO to run Tesla by a certain amount of time, despite the fact that he owns the majority of the stock. So he's no stranger to what a public SpaceX is going to be like for him to be able to dictate whatever position or decision he wants to do. Those
At
days
one
are going
at
to come.
one point, he was looking to try to get Tesla to buy back its own stock, right? To
Right.
go from public to private. So it's really surprising that he wants to go public with SpaceX, and it does make you wonder
Why?
what caused the pivot. I mean, what
And
it's not. I mean, it's one thing to say that the IPO is responsible for the pivot Mars to Moon,
I
but what
think it's
caused the pivot to go IPO?
Well,
so.
I would suspect
Here,
it's
one of the best examples is you may remember, maybe it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, Musk had a really lame, crappy, not, I think it was bankrupt solar power company to put solar power panels on roofs of housetops.
Yeah,
And
Solar
what did he
City or
do?
something
Solar,
like that.
yeah. He got SpaceX to buy them out at a huge value. You think that would happen with a public
Tesla, yeah.
SpaceX? Was it Tesla that I thought it
Yeah,
was
Tesla
SpaceX?
bought it, right?
Tesla bought it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, he's not going to have that kind of say so with a public SpaceX. And what does he wants to to merge the AI program? He's doing that before he goes public with SpaceX.
Mhm.
And then he talked about merging Tesla and SpaceX, but I'm not sure that's going to fly anyplace. But his life will be different with a public SpaceX, and his decision making will be, and I think it's influential on his more evolutionary and sensible approach that Mars is where the moon is where our resources need to be for now.
Let me add a couple of data points. Um, Last I heard, Elon owned 12.5% of Tesla stock, and he owns about 42% of SpaceX stock. Now, with the merger of XAI into SpaceX, I have not seen an adjustment there in his ownership, but he SpaceX, he definitely has controlling interest. He really doesn't need to talk to anybody to make a decision. Of course, he does, but and after the IPO, the company is going to be even larger, and the amount of money he is dealing in is a big stressor. Now, when you come in there and talk about controlling the stock, yeah, 12.5% is enough to control Tesla. And could he merge the two companies together and make an interesting, more interesting IPO to scatter the investment more? Yeah, that's a possibility too. We kind of got to see how he wants to play the game. And when just
Well,
talking about ownership, boy, this is it right now. It's basically what would you call it? Blind poker. You're putting down cards and you're hoping to, that it comes out good. Maybe it's going to come out to his disadvantage, but I don't think anybody has any idea exactly how it's going to fall.
he's going to need a very friendly SEC and a very friendly Attorney General and Department of Justice. And to the
Mm,
degree that he doesn't have that in an upcoming administration or a future administration, whatever that may be, he's going to have oversight. And
oh,
I think he's acutely aware of it. And
mhm,
I think while there are a lot of factors that make great sense to pivot toward the moon, I think there are some other factors that are also very
mhm.
influential upon him as a person that are making him think about taking other steps.
I think one of the challenges that Elon faces is you sort of alluded to it earlier, is that when you go public, you have to deal with short sellers, and short sellers are quite happy to fund investigations
Absolutely.
into what kinds of bullshit you're spouting. So that's scary to Elon. I think he gets a lot of investment by making aspirational claims. And but the fact that he's willing to go public anyway suggests that the business model around orbital data centers made on the moon and launched into the moon by a mass driver
Mhm.
does have like real legs. Like there's math that you can do that can be
Make
supported to say
and
that will actually pay off in the long run. So it could be that he feels like he's got a strong enough business case there that he can afford risking the short sellers attacking him at every opportunity they get.
absolutely. He's dotting his I's, so to speak. Yeah,
Yeah.
Marshall.
Uh, I just had an interesting thought. As I recall, the Democratic Party in the last election spent $1.5 billion and lost to Trump. I think Trump spent somewhere around $750 million. And wait a minute, Elon can almost take that out of the pocket money. So I don't think he's going to have problems with the next administration, no matter who they are, because politicians always want money to run for office, and he's got the biggest bank account.
And I think the courts are not going to prevent him, so long as it's within the law. I don't. I
Mhm.
think they're going to issue the launch license. If there's
Yeah.
a strictly political blocking of free enterprise, I think he's going to take the government to court, and I think the courts are going to say this is a politically motivated decision.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And I'd also
I
toss
agree that.
in there that he's got plenty of lawyers on staff to do just about anything he needs.
Well, they can certainly slow him down, and there are groups
Good.
that can file friend of the court lawsuits like those desert animal environmental groups did in at Starbase to slow down some of the Texas thing. So there are enough science people right now that are writing letters and op-eds and articles, and we've discussed some of them on the space show,
Mhm.
that do not believe there should be any commercial operations on the moon or Mars, and it should be 100% preserved for science. So if these groups get legs and they feel that their science is really threatened and they really believe that, they can file their own litigation suits, at which
Mhm.
the government will have to hear. So you can raise the cost of SpaceX. You can delay the projects. On Mars, you
Mhm.
can clearly delay enough
Mhm.
to miss a launch window and have to wait for the next launch window if they plan their litigation right. So it's not, can they stop it forever? It's what's the
Yeah.
damage they can do and the
Mhm.
slowdown, and what can they do to the cost of the company wanting to do these missions?
I mean,
True.
they are able to slow down. They've been trying this Boca Chica, but they have not succeeded. And
But how
SpaceX
many
is
months did it take, Doug? And how much money did, no, he has money, but now he's going to have a public corp. So are they going to want to spend money on litigation? And time is money for these people when they could be
Mhm.
doing other things with the company. So, and if they have a friendly administration for filing their lawsuit, it can be very costly. And with Mars, you can miss launch windows and then you have more
Mhm.
delays. So it's not a slam dunk. Could they stop him forever? I seriously doubt it. But could they raise hell and raise his cost and cause delays? Yeah, I think our system is set up where if you're a litigant, you can raise hell with people's schedules and
Mhm.
legal costs.
Yeah. I
I think that
totally agree. The legal costs and people can always take cheap shots, but I think that's already been factored in. And Elon has probably got several lawyers out there
Oh, I'm sure
looking
they're
at
working on it
places
already.
that they could be blocked and prepared to get them canceled before they get to first base.
Yeah,
So,
if he's smart, they're working on it already.
yes,
I mean,
I do.
I have pointed out. I mean, this I find this really interesting because to me, the one big unanswerable problem with Mars is forward and back contamination. It's really, how can you prove that there's no microbes on Mars and what the human biome would do to it? How can you prove with absolute certainty that you're not going to bring back some sort of virus that's going to knock out all of your nitrogen fixing bacteria on Earth? You can't prove it. You can't look in you can't prove you can't prove a negative, right?
Well,
You can't look
didn't
at every.
Hoover say Canadian geese proves it?
Well, yes, but that's arguable. Yes. I mean, I think it's a decent argument, but it's still arguable. Okay. So this is the one thing. So the thing, but right up to this point, the activist organizations haven't taken up that issue. But the closer Elon gets to landing on Mars, I think, if they're going to be looking for someone to stop him.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
But the beautiful, I'm in the middle. But the beautiful thing is that with this new focus on the moon, I think it actually takes attention of the media away from Mars. And I think that's a good thing because, boy, it's really hard to make an environmental case on the moon compared with the environmental case Mars. There's not really a forward back contamination issue for the moon. And so I think this actually is going to help the situation with the legal and the protest aspects with Mars. Over.
Marshall, you wanted to say something else?
I was going to say yes. Good point.
Yeah. I wanted to say that Ryan Watson is online, but he hasn't said anything. So I would like to see if he wants to say something. Ryan?
Hey, yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, I've just been listening today. I'm working on, oh my goodness, I'm just working on like a personal project right at the moment for this, for some AI stuff. So, yeah, I've just been listening to the conversation thus far. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Would you have any thoughts on pivoting to the moon, Mars, any of the stuff we've been talking about?
Oh goodness. Okay. I think what I mentioned in the email thread earlier in the week, and just to state it here so that for listeners, was the I think about along the lines of like looking at it from an economic point of view about the trying to make money on the moon. That's where the money's at. I think that was covered early in the conversation as well. That's where the interest is right now. I don't believe that Musk is sort of throwing away or dumping or walking away from Mars. It's just a matter of like where the money's at right now. There does seem to be a lot of momentum towards some kind of like a lunar base. I find it interesting the technical challenges for the mass driver as well. And yeah, I guess yeah, that's about it right now. I think that the conversation we were starting to get into was for Mars was looking at like the some of the more controversial aspects of it. I think Doug was onto a good track there about the like once there's sort of a tipping point met, like once we get closer to an actual launch, then the activists will just sort of come out of the woodwork and begin going after him.
Absolutely, they'll burn him at the stake.
Through this conversation, I'm still left with the question, why couldn't SpaceX have made this pivot from Mars to the moon? For orbital data centers, for mass drivers, for whatever reason, for NASA's budget. Why couldn't they have done that as a private company? Why the IPO? I still don't get that.
Well,
I think I could answer that one because
Yeah.
I think basically you go to private investors for so long and they think they're smart, but they're probably not that much smarter than the average public. So they have very aspirational hope, but they have high hopes as well. And you can only dip into that well for so long before you kind of you see it drying up, right? I think at this point, Elon's got now a plan that's much larger in scope than say Starlink, which was a good plan to get investment in the past. The orbital data centers is a much larger concept, and the people he's tapped before for the institutional investments and stuff, I think just don't have deep enough pockets for that kind of project. So he needs to go to the public, partly because he's tapped the well dry from the institutional investors, I think, to a degree, and partly because his idea is so big.
there's another reason too.
Faustian bargain then.
Yeah, and another
Yeah.
reason too. So a lot of the institutional investors and big individual investors that are part of it, they like to see exit strategies.
Yeah.
And there are no exit strategies now. Musk has a deal,
Mhm.
SpaceX has a deal with the SEC where they can release a certain number of shares every year from being private to public so that people retiring or having a medical problem or for whatever reason needing to cash out can sell their share to qualified investors, but they can do it publicly so that they have a limited, very limited exit strategy program. And I know individuals who are qualified investors, but not the big fat cats that Phil was referencing a few minutes ago with institutional investors, have bought as much as 10, 20,000 shares of SpaceX stock because they're wealthy individuals. So they have bought it publicly, but it still has the statement on it that it's not registered stock. So I think people want exit strategies, and he's gone to the private fat cat wealthy wealth for so many years and for so long, and they don't have an exit strategy unless they can find a way to market their stock privately where the values are uncertain, where they can participate in this SpaceX plan to sell a few shares every year for the retired people and such. So going public, exit strategies are no longer a big deal. They can
Right.
they can leave whenever they want, or
Hmm.
finance, or they can finance their stock. They can, borrow against it. They can put it up for collateral.
Mhm.
Do that with letter stock.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I appreciate that.
That's true. Yeah. Liquidity is what it comes down to.
So I've been thinking about this mass driver thing and trying to think. It's really quite interesting because there's been at least a couple of entities that have produced solar cells from regoliths, lunar regoliths.
There's been papers.
I think you froze up, Doug, if you're still there.
Mhm.
Doug
I've
is
been getting this vibe from Doug. I've been getting this vibe from Doug's video that he's like flying an X-wing or something.
Can you
He's
guys
in a
hear me?
car.
No,
He's
you
in a
froze
car.
up, Doug, like you're in the bottom of a crater or something.
Are
Can
you
you
flying
hear
an
me now?
ultralight?
You're frozen up again. He's frozen
Guys,
up.
I'm
No, we can hear you now, Doug. Go ahead.
okay. Thank you, John. Okay, so, can't hear me? Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Something's wrong with your connection. It's intermittent.
Yeah.
Maybe cut your video off and you'll have more bandwidth.
Or fly closer to a cell tower.
Doug, can you hear us?
Okay, well,
Oh, while we're waiting, does anyone else want to offer up something on, or maybe even a completely different open lines topic in the next 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, I'd love to do one on mass drivers and the idea of a factory on the moon that can produce data centers. I think that's an interesting topic in itself, and we could probably have an open lines on that at some point.
Could
Or
you
I,
do
or I could
it?
even try to do a presentation on it at some point if you'd like.
Could you do it as a standalone show?
Yeah, I think maybe, yeah. I haven't done a lot of work on data center feasibility, but I've done a lot of work on mass driver feasibility, so I could at least do the mass driver part.
You want to
Yeah.
put your act together and do it on the 24th?
Not this month?
Yeah, that's
No, not it's too early for me.
two, 2 weeks away from now.
Yeah, I think
Can
I'm
you
gonna
guys?
push it out a bit beyond that.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, Doug,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I was thinking about this mass driver, and it's really interesting. What direction do you want to launch it? Do you want to launch it in the anterior grade, the direction that the moon is orbiting the Earth, and take advantage of that, additional delta V that you get just naturally, or shoot backwards and then actually drop down towards Earth? And the other thing is, so Blue Origin with Blue Alchemist, as well as Alex Ignatieff at I think the University of Houston, if I'm not mistaken, they have both produced solar cells from lunar regolith. It's actually producing solar cells is not that difficult. If a lot fewer steps than a lot fewer layers than like CPUs, for example, and the resolution doesn't have to be anywhere near what the CPUs need to be. So imagine SpaceX setting up process to process the regolith, go ahead and produce these solar panels. I'm imagining they would probably be square solar panels that are sort of accordion connected to each other, accordion configuration into a block. So it'd be a cube of these sort of folded up solar panels, all compacted together. In the center of that is a very low mass data processing unit, a GPU or something. And then you have this block, I'm imagining something like 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters, something like that. And what you do is you put it on the mass driver. I have heard that there is a university students did a study, and they found out they could get the length of the mass driver down to a bit less than a kilometer, which seems like a doable. You can get a straight path that's a kilometer long, I think, without too much supports to keep it straight. And then, yeah, do you launch in the direction that the moon is going or back? And if you put it into an orbit where it intersects the lunar orbit, then you're going to have lunar perturbations of the orbit, which could send it outside of the Earth-Moon system. So my thought is it wouldn't take but a small percentage of the mass. They'd probably have to ship from the Earth to the Moon for a propulsion unit that would require just a very small amount of delta V, like about a half a kilometer per second. But what you could also do is you could use those solar panels as solar sails and, adjust it and get it, like below lunar orbit, and sort of get it away from being perturbed. but and that wouldn't require any propulsive unit. It's just how you orient the solar panels to the sun. But I think the issue is the time delay for the processing. Like, say, for example, if you submit a prompt and it goes up into orbit. It goes up into the Earth Moon system to where these things are. It would be introducing an extra as much as 2.6-second round trip delay, which for some processing, like for training, that's not a problem at all. But for inference, it would make things just a bit slower. And so I'm sure, but if you're in an elliptical orbit, then you could assign the stuff that need to be processed quickly to the satellites as they're near the Earth than far away. So there's a lot of interesting technical challenges as how to optimize this system. But I got to tell you, if you could launch these satellites from the moon, the cost of launch would be dramatically less than launching it from Earth, even with full reusability. Marshall?
You were.
Let me toss in the U.S. Gerald Ford has an electronic catapult system, which takes F-18. I think that's over 20,000 pounds, and basically drives it up to about 3G, and I think it's going over 120 miles an hour in basically 3 seconds to launch. So with that kind of capability, you can make a mass driver that can launch all sorts of things. That's very short and could put things into orbit around the moon with no problem at all. Then you add a couple of ion engines to guide it to wherever you want. I don't see any problem at all launching a fully folded, just like you launch from Earth, data center. Just build it on the moon, put it on, launch it, have it unfold as it goes out there, and it's no problem at all as far as I can see.
There's a
any,
good
acceleration.
any problem in that?
there's a good
What
YouTube channel
kind of
called
acceleration
Anthro.
are these payloads subject to?
The G forces, it's about
Yeah,
3G.
right.
It's
But
3Gs. I mean, the pilot's sitting in there,
I know, but I'm talking about to get to orbit.
No,
yeah,
290 Gs.
190.
Yeah, that depends on the length of the launcher.
290 Gs if it's less than 1 kilometer.
Yeah. So
would
It's
they be
challenging
able
to put together an assembly that can be folded and then has to unfold that can live with
that can withstand?
290 Gs. It's a
That's
challenge.
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a solvable challenge.
Now, there's a good
I'm not sure about that. But
video YouTuber called Anthrofuturism, and he's made a number of videos where he talked about mass drivers on the moon, and I feel like his technical depth is pretty good. I've actually emailed with him. So if you're interested in learning more about the feasibility of this idea, I'd recommend watching some of his videos.
For
What is the name again?
For some context, shells that have the chips, these are artillery shells, they experience between 20,000 and 30,000 Gs when they're fired. So I think 290 Gs for solid state materials is probably doable.
Well, as you said, you got to take the solar panels and stretch them out. That's the limit. And I don't think you're going to get 1,000 Gs or anywhere close to that without the solar panels falling off.
Mm-hmm.
No, they would be folded up as I described in the accordion sort of conformation, so that now you're going to have like springs, and the springs are going to have to remain in their position despite the 290 Gs. But I do think that is doable.
Oh, it can probably be done. It's just not cost effective. I think of cheap things to do.
I disagree.
Launching forward is probably better.
I need to I need to say bye. It's kind of a
Yeah.
little too long for me. I have to go and attend to something. So
Yeah.
Jay, you
nice
wanted to tell
talking.
us about your meetings really quick. Do you have a
Yeah,
few
sure.
minutes for
Yeah,
a quick summary?
yeah, I can. Yeah, I can do that. I met with. I had a very good meeting with senior advisor to Senator Scott, Rick Scott of Florida, who is obviously interested in space and stuff. So I had a very good meeting with him, and I discussed some of what we were talking about today, including the possibility of Artemis, and including the possibility. He was also saying that we may have a problem with cadence if there is a lot of people, commercials, and also Golden Dome people wanting to launch things. That we would have problem with cadence. We don't have uh, facility available. I told him that you are probably putting cart before the horse by saying that, because we are still trying to worry about going to the moon in all those things, and that's not anywhere near the possibility of settlement. He asked me to also get in touch with a couple of other people. Um, you guys probably know Senator Mike Lee of Utah, and also a person named Maddie, who is assistant to Cruz, or whether she's assistant to Cruz or for the whole Commerce Committee, I'm not sure. But in any case, those are the people that I'm going to be getting in touch with very soon. It was a great meeting. I would say 2 to 3 times better than I expected. And I, I got, I mean, pretty good meeting. So I cannot say too much for obvious reasons. So, because I have to keep some things kind of confidential. So, okay. Anything else?
Not for me. Does anybody else have anything before AJ wants to take off?
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you, AJ.
Thank you.
Um, Real quick, of those of you who were present with our, I'm going to call it our artist program, for lack of a better descriptive, Tuesday night, I'd love to hear some takeaways from you. So I know a few of you are here that were in that program. Jossie, Phil,
Mhm.
Marshall, John
Mhm.
Hunt. Your thoughts? Crackpot? Crazy? Good? Good? Anything?
I didn't think he was too crackpot. I didn't get crackpot off of him. I got, a little bit
His
leaning towards negativity, but I felt like he was asking the right questions, and he was pretty good at like poking holes. But just he made assumptions that were in his favor.
Mhm.
he was very artistic. You could tell he was right-brained and very creative. He had a lot of ideas, but the ideas did not have an engineering basis.
Mhm. I have to totally agree with that. I I see people that work that way, and it's kind of like their brains are somewhere else, and they seem to have a lot of emotion tied to, in some cases, just a color, or some artistic factor that drives them in that direction. It doesn't make sense to me, but then, hey, uh, my wife tells me I don't make any sense too. So,
Um, I'm behind in my archive, something not so unusual since they're going up on so many different venues now. But I hope for those of you that don't know what we're really talking about, that this particular program will be posted later today. And it was from this past Tuesday with Frank. And You might find it interesting, and for sure you're going to find it differently. So I don't know what else to say, but I was interested in your commentary if you had any about it. Anybody have any closing comments for today that they have omitted and wanted to talk about and have not talked about yet? Nobody?
Well,
I'm sorry.
I'll circle back to the original topic, which was the article, just for a second to say, um, Phil, I think you're the only one of us that actually saw the conclusion. Where did it go?
I didn't actually get all the way to the end of the article because we were talking.
Yeah.
But I can guess. The conclusion was, this the whole idea is full of holes, and I think that's where he was heading with his conclusion. He might have softened his tone at the end, but I didn't get that far.
Well, it sounded like he was going toward a solution that was Falcon Heavy related.
That's true. I remember that was the part where the article was cut off initially, forcing you to
Yeah.
sign up. So I didn't see that part, so I don't know. I'll have to
Do
let you
any
know
of
after I
you
finish reading
Okay.
it.
do
We'll all
any
have
of
to go subscribe.
Right.
can you print the article and send it to us, Phil?
Yeah, I might be able to. I'm not sure that's a copyright violation. I can't admit to doing that over the air.
Do any of you have any uh, thoughts? Because I think I can access email addresses here for inviting Thunderfoot or Will Lockett to the show. Now, Phil was right. Thunderfoot is a PhD chemist from Oxford. He is in England, and he's a real McCoy science guy for sure. And he's not out in left field, and he does due diligence on lots of different topics. He's not totally space focused, and um, if you don't measure up to his kind of Oxford chemistry PhD due diligence training, I guess the hatchet falls on you.
That's
Um,
pretty much it.
and as for Will Lockett, it seems to me he's totally politically biased and inclined to attack most things, but I can't find any training or anything about him that would make me really want to pay attention to what he says in the future because he may just have good opinions or bad opinions. I think Thunderfoot has credibility in being able to do some due diligence and some to get into science and understand things. So I think he's at a different level, but I do have access to his email. I don't know if he would come on the show or not. And I probably maybe could get to Will Lockett through Substack. I'm not sure about that. But what
Sure, you could.
any thought of any of you about inviting these guys to do a standalone program? Would you want to attend it?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'd love to see either of them actually. Thunderfoot, I think, will be a little bit harder to get on, but I think it'd actually do a lot for his credibility to get into a forum where people are actually going back and forth with him on his ideas and challenging his points of view. Right now, I feel like he's just producing in a one-way kind of way. You probably read some of his comments, but he
Right.
doesn't have that dialogue.
Mhm.
And
He's
Um,
been doing this YouTube channel since 2006. It's
what?
quite a tenure.
Say again, Phil? I mean,
He's
Bill.
been doing this YouTube channel since 2006.
Yeah,
So that's quite a long time to be doing
it's 20 years.
that voice out in the wilderness, you know?
mhm.
So yeah, I think it'd be great to have him.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see if I can find out how to contact him. And well, now I think Lockett is more ideologically, politically driven. So I don't usually do a politically ideological show. So I'm not sure he could be isolated to space and not end up being, totally
Ba-
nonpartisan.
Based on the one article that we talked about today, I mean, the argument that he was making there was a technical argument. It was not a political argument.
Mhm.
I think, we may be questioning the validity of the technical argument, but I would call it not a political argument.
Yeah, so if he could be limited to space, for example, instead of getting off into the world is burning and the politicians aren't
Mhm.
doing anything about it,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Uh, he may be right, but that's for a different audience.
Yeah.
All right.
In general, David, when you talk to them, I uh, when you talk to me on the phone and so on like that, I get a feeling if somebody is going to be good on the space show or not. And you have to, I mean, I've talked to some people that are just totally nuts, but you get them on a topic and they perform very good. And you get them on a different topic, they fall apart. And being able to judge that's one of your special
Well,
talents.
I was really nervous about Frank on Tuesday. I thought, God, I should never have agreed to this because he wanted to talk about a whole bunch of stuff that I wouldn't allow him to bring on today,
Yeah, well,
like what
that,
I put in the text message to you and
hmm,
on the show. So, but he had to be stopped talking so that others could talk, and
yeah,
and I really wrote on him before the show about what the show was about and
mhm,
stuff like
yeah,
that. I think that Ramey, who came on with him, was incredibly articulate and bright, and
yeah,
I introduced
mhm,
her to my friend, and I said, if you have a way to connect the dots of your art finance methodology and what you're doing with art to your interest and support for space, I would invite you to the space show. And she has not replied to that. But I wouldn't do a show just on art finance because that's a
yeah.
little bit
Well,
of the topic
uh,
for us.
this is where good judgment comes in.
But she was incredibly articulate, much more so than Frank was.
Mhm,
And I'd love to know how she plans to finance art differently, and maybe there are some appropriateness of that you can put into space. I don't know.
yeah,
That's what I was after.
yeah. Well, it's time for me to go. So,
Everybody have a great rest of the weekend. Look up always. There's an
mhm,
eclipse coming up of the moon, and Andy Fracknoid is coming on March 1st. Now, unfortunately, in the Pacific time zone, it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. I forget the exact time on March 1st. So it'll be on a little bit different times for each of you, depending on where you're located. But it's not prime time, let's put it that way. But Andy's going to come back on and talk about why this lunar eclipse is really special, plus other things going on in astronomy. So that's March 1st on Sunday.
All
So
right.
everyone, and he's a great guy and a media guy. Those of you who know the Bay Area know him. He's had an astronomy show for longer than I've been alive. So um, he's a good guest, and I'm
Okay.
tangled in wiring under the desk. So everyone have a great weekend. Keep looking up, and remember there is no program Tuesday, and we
mhm.
will be back on Hotel Mars on Friday and Sunday. Goodbye, everybody from the space show.